So next up, I already alluded to something that we haven't done before in this format, which is we're trying to do a panel with like several people and have a discussion about the different topics that we're talking here today. So it's a panel discussion about opportunities and risks for AI for developers. And I got 3 people that I'm super excited about having here. They're all stateside, so they're all busy. So I want to welcome Dodds on stage.
Hello.
And I want to get Angie Jones here as well, which I'm really excited about to have again. And of course, Liran is also another person that we have here, which we just had a test with yesterday. So we're all wondering like if everything is going to work. So this is a test that's going to happen here right now. Now, Dodds is known from the YouTubes. You've probably seen some of his videos, and you've seen what he can do. He's doing a lot of explanations for developers, like deep down things on CSS, deep down things on front-end technologies. Angie Jones is from Block, and she's Tech Girl 1908 on the thing that should not be mentioned and should be blue sky for most people by now. And I'm not saying anything usefully, but like she's been around for the last Congress as well, and she's done a lot of DevRel work. And it's going to be interesting to see what she thinks the next steps are there, because she thought about the next steps of the internet before, like with the Web 5 stuff that we've done. And Liran is a security expert, and he's shown us in our security live day how much problems there are in generated LLM code and how people are trusting it too much. So after I now introduced all of you, I think Angie and Kent, you both have a hard stop at like 15 past. So let's get quickly started with Angie. Like when it comes to like opportunities and risks for developers. In the DevRel space, what is your biggest issue with AI right now? What do people try to actually get too hard in one direction? What does it mean for DevRel that we're now in a space where we have post-code and to generated code world?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. First of all, good to be back. In DevRel, what I'm starting to see, and it's not just DevRel, but it's everyone, but especially DevRel, because a big part of our job is to create content, right? So we're creating blog posts and, think pieces and things like that, even conference talks and abstracts. And I'm starting to see a lot of folks kind of run right to, your LLMs, your chat GPTs and things like that, to write these things for them. And it's painfully obvious to those who have an eye for it, which I feel like I got a master class in it because I reviewed abstracts for a conference. And so as I'm reading hundreds of abstracts, you start to see a pattern, and the pattern is the bot's voice, right? And so at some point, I became very hungry for that human story. I started to, whether this is fair or not, I started to penalize those abstracts that were completely written by AI. And I justified that by thinking, well, if they use it to do, these couple of paragraphs, are they going to let it write their entire talk? And no one wants to pay money to go to a conference and hear that sort of thing. So that's something that I'm warning people about.
I feel the same. I mean, I looked at 1,800 submissions for last year's Congress, and there were like, the ones that were obviously ChatGPT, I got filtered out as well, because I saw then talks of the people, or I talked to them sometimes in a call, and I'm like, that was not your voice. Why do you even bother? There were people that were like non-native speakers and thought like, oh, their accent is not good enough, so I'm not going to speak because of that. Well, here's the first thing. If somebody's got an accent, they speak more languages than you. That's already something to remember. And it's actually giving you much more personal thing. And like people think we want to have that. And AI generated content is wanted by AI bots, not by humans. So it actually makes you feel weird. But like I in the newsletter tomorrow, I have like this piece that half of LinkedIn now is actually AI generated, the content in there. So the content pieces for people like us who spend years and years honing our skills in writing and like explaining things, And then you see the generated stuff just basically getting higher ranked in search engines because it was actually made for the algorithm rather than that. Do you feel the same things happening to you, Kent, or is it something you seem to have a long format idea in your content, whereas like most of the generated stuff is shorter because 4 seconds are cheaper to generate than like 1 minute? But do you feel that there's that they're stepping on your turf with auto-generated DevRel stuff as well?
For me, it's a little bit unique because I established myself pretty well early on, and so I'm not quite as concerned, or maybe I should be more concerned than I am. But I am mostly focused on the audience that I do have, and then my good work kind of speaks for itself, and people share that, and so. Well, I do get plenty of traffic from organic search and things, and so there's probably some competition there. Mostly, I'm focused on the audience that I have already. I do, or I have heard that AI generated content is being used to submit resumes to like job applications, which clogs the system for everybody. It's really bad, and then of course. On the other end of the fence, we've got people using AI to filter resumes. And so it's just AIs talking to each other, which is really, really bad, which I think is why events like this one are so critical. And even in-person events, even more so, that you need to have that human element to like connect with people. In fact, all of the jobs that I've ever had came from in-person connections that I have with people. And I think that is going to be increasingly important for people to differentiate themselves from the AI-generated content that's out there.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of problems with that. I mean, like the when you said about bots talking to bots, I've seen people that put like hidden text in their CVs right now that they actually have a degree from some university, just so they're not getting filtered out by a bot. So that's like SEO 1997, 1998, where basically Googlebot didn't realize if you use transparent text on background kind of thing, but it became cleverer that way as well and actually penalized you for it. But yeah, it's an interesting thing when you say like we're going back to our community. I'm actually really worried about, and I wrote about this like 3 years ago, that to me, where I wrote a blog post and said like the web starts on page 4. Because the first 3 pages of Google were basically SEO optimized nonsense or ads. So basically the things that I wanted to find in Google were basically on the 4th page, and by now I've kind of given up with the summaries that you get up there. I'm using DuckDuckGo, I'm using Bing, I'm using other things, and I'm trying to find my content in a way. And the bigger problem is that these automated summaries are based on models that don't get updated because it's very expensive to update a model, and it's basically that's why they roll out every half year. So when you look for really hot CSS new stuff, you will get code examples back that are basically outdated and don't have these new functionality, or tell you you can't use them right now. So do you think the vanishing bit of web search is a big problem for us as web developers or as DevRel people to get our stuff indexed, and what could we do about it? Angie, that's probably you.
Yeah, it is a huge problem. I was just thinking the other day, like I wanted to search on like this new tool or technology that came out. And as I was searching for it, I couldn't find the blog post. You know how we used to like look for the blog post? That's what I want. And I can't find that anymore. And as someone who leads a team who writes blog posts, that's really disheartening for me. And I honestly don't have the answer for it other than to socialize to your existing network, as Ken said. And so I'll send it out on, LinkedIn or something like that to try to connect with the people who I've already connected to, but I'm still beholden to their algorithms, right? If I have, 100,000 followers, they only show it to 5,000 of them. So we might need to get back to the days of a good old newsletter,
A lot of people do. I mean, it has a resurrection right now, like everybody's starting. And I was we can bring Liran on that one as well, because I actually talked to him during the security day, and I was during the test yesterday, because you just started a newsletter and I was talking to you like, how is it going? And you had this wonderful answer that you don't care actually how well it's going because you just wanted to publish something. You found so many things and want to find an outlet to do it. So why did you choose a newsletter over blog?
Well, I do both, but I think there's like something more personal about curating content in a newsletter form. So like you actually are having the ability to express kind of like, what's important, your tidbits of specific articles you're reading. And also I think there's an element, like if we go back to the blog post versus, kind of like adversarial AI usage, like LLM generated content. I think there's an element there around having like the human factor into it. So for example, YouTube is an interesting concept which I think is on the rise, because like when I go and watch, maybe Kent, do an explainer video, I can emotionally relate, right? Because I relate Kent with like, the skateboard and a bunch of stuff that I know about him and things like that. And I get a more emotional connection to that, even though I'm not really a video person. I'm like more of like a, writing and written content. But I think that's kind of like the element that gets now filled into it. So yeah, that's my take, and happy to like maybe change gears here into more of an positive AI spin, unless you want me to go into how hackers actually adversarials use AI against you. But we can give it up for now.
That sounds like a talk to me that you could submit to some event. Like, I mean, I don't know which event that could be, but like, with any of them will do. Basically, that's an option there. I mean, it's an interesting thing when you talked about video content versus text content as well. I think that's where we can still shine as humans, because it's easier for us to actually write text content that has a personal voice and takes a different approach to something. And not just like the happy garden path to go directly to the result, which most generated content does. It also drives me nuts when I just look for something, and the first thing is like a video, and I'm like, just give me the 3 buttons I have to press on the coffee machine to make it work again. Don't show me a 15-minute video of it actually of you showing and asking for sponsorship halfway through. I want to know how to fix that coffee machine. So I think, positive aspects of AI. I mean, one thing I learned is that a lot of people find out by generated code about things that they never thought of. Like I do the same with like the console. When I go into the console and just type in like window dot, and then I find all these methods that are in the browser now that I never knew were there before. And I think code assistants can do similar things. So do you think, Kent, there is a way to actually get people into more learning things by getting code written for them and they take a look at it? Or is it really hard for people to even consider that, rather than just like, oh, that's probably good, so I'm going to send that off?
Yeah, so this is where experienced engineers have a leg up on those who are not experienced, because when code is generated, we can look at it and say, oh, that's not right. But like a new developer would be like, is it right? And so, but the interesting thing is when we were new, we would go to Stack Overflow and we'd look at it and be like, is it right? And like experienced engineers would be like, oh, that's not right, right? So I do think that it's a little bit different than that, but it's pretty similar. And I think that even the inexperienced engineers are going to accept the thing that's not right, and then they'll figure out what's wrong, or they'll figure out that it's wrong, and eventually, like, we all have to go through the school of hard knocks. Like it is a challenge, and so just finding I guess they have an accelerated path to finding the wrong thing, and then they have to figure out the right thing there too. But I do use AI constantly in my software development, right? In my editor, I'm using Cursor right now, but they're all very interesting. And I actually also use it for creating content, especially written content, quite a lot, actually. So I use a service called Blog Recorder that allows me to just talk into the microphone about whatever it is that I want to talk about, and it will generate a blog post. And then it has they actually just added a feature where you can have it write it in your voice. So you give it some examples and things. And then before I was just using ChatGPT. The nice thing about having such an established amount of of written content is that the LLMs have been trained on my content. So when I say write it like Kent C. Dodds, they actually do a pretty good job. And so then, yeah, I can just read through it. I make quite a few edits, but it kind of solves that blank page problem for me, where I have all these, like, this jumble of thoughts in my mind, and now I've got this blank page. How do I get that on there? And so just talking into my microphone of all those thoughts and then having something generated, then is something that I can edit, actually helps quite a lot. So I'm using AI a ton, and I would actually invite people to look at my most recent writings. I haven't used AI for everything. I'd love for somebody to see if they can figure out which ones were AI generated or assisted and which ones weren't, because it's actually, I don't think
Angie's the sleuth there. She'd be the one that picks it immediately. No, I understand that. I mean, you're in a unique position, though, like in a boutique position where basically you have a lot of content that it can index. Like finding your own voice is probably a different thing when you actually follow the things that get generated for you. And I always call it the like overly excited Californian from 1983, how ChatGPT writes when you don't give it any instructions. It's like everything is super and everything is amazing, and that is quite funny when you get like European people submit talks that are scrumpy about everything. It's just like the disconnect between the two is so much fun. I just got reminded about something that's kind of off topic, but there is a wonderful TED talk by Roger Ebert, like the film critic, because he had cancer of the thorax. So basically he couldn't speak any longer, but he had like years and years ago, he had like a company that did the voices for Siri. He sent them like decades of his TV show, and they made his iPad speak in his voice because they could take all that content in and do it. And that's what I love, that when AI can actually take something that's not available anymore and bring it back to life that way. So I think that's an interesting point when you say that. Now, the generated content thing, like when you actually, when we talk about, we use Stack Overflow to copy and paste. And I was always not a big fan of Stack Overflow and a big enemy of W3 schools, because it always gave you the result that does the job. It explains the how, but not the why. It explains here's how to do it, but not like why it works. So it's Liran, we can just go into the security bit a bit here. Like, do you find that generated code is overly optimistic about like things not attacking it, or is this something that is just my impression?
I think we've kind of like been getting demonstrations where even if you ask AI to like produce, like you ask the LLM and like honestly put pressure on it, if so to say, you're like, hey, generate me this, Node backend application has to be secure. If not, I'll get fired. Like, all like do your best job, make it, production, military grade, whatever pressure you want to put on it, right? If you do that, you still end up with vulnerable code. And I think that's kind of expected, right? Like it reads a bunch of code. It's not the best code in the world. It's like everyone's, so it's basically average. And to an extent, like Kent was saying before, like that Stack Overflow example, we used to go there and like if you wanted to do like implement something like, I don't know, unzip files or something, you don't know how to do that. It's like, zipping, compression, that's like a whole different like area. You don't really know. You go there, you copy a snippet of code, you put it in, and it works, right? But you are not aware that what you've basically now introduced is like this arbitrary file, right? Because of the way that you could uncompress file in like in a vulnerable way. And to an extent, that exact, and by the way, that's like a very popular example where there's like a very like highly voted answer that is actually vulnerable. So a bunch of developers, get that vulnerable code all the time. And what happens is with LLMs is just we've basically like took the friction to zero because it's in your IDE. The speed to do that is basically the time it takes you to hit the tab key and autocomplete the suggested code. But it's the exact same aspect of it from that experience. And so you'd end up having vulnerabilities. But I think if you really drill down to the problem of like, risks with LLM, is usually the problem that it doesn't really understand the entire context of a web application. And you could imagine where you have two different files open. One of them has like an implementation to do something, and it does it in a certain way. and you're like viewing one as like, think about, backend models, like, the basic MVC kind of things. You have like a model, you have a controller and stuff like that. And you may be putting a lot of like sanitization and validation on the controller part. Some of that was already done in the, in the model or like the service. And what ends up happening is, even if you tell the LLM to like, hey, you have to like decode the data, escape it, whatever, in the controller, and it does it correctly, it could potentially, without knowing that some of that was already implemented later down in the layers, it could actually implement and introduce a vulnerability, because of like, there are some vulnerabilities that are so subtle that if you do like double decoding of data, you would actually introduce vulnerabilities to the system. So there's like so much like nuance that has to be put into the way that you write code and like the system is built, that I think will get better in time with LLMs, but like it's still not there, right? Like you still want that code to go through like, a security scanner, like a security person running it, a friendly, a senior person, and like a peer colleague reviewing it and like giving you some ideas and seeing if something like went wrong.
Yeah, when we talked about security day about that as well, I think the gatekeeping of your editor, having a linter turned on, or having something that actually reviews the code for plain vulnerabilities, like very obvious things, is something that helps you. Angie, I mean, like when we talk about DevRel, I mean, it always cracks me up that like most of the time I feel like teaching people not just to copy and paste things they don't understand, but actually set up an environment where the environment saves them from shooting themselves in the foot. Is this something that you found as well, that people are too just like trusting to things for copy and paste because obviously somebody uploaded it, it should be fine?
Yeah, I do. And I'm a little worried, honestly, because as much as we say like, oh, don't just copy and paste it, we know that people just copy and paste it, right? But to Ken's point, when I do go to chat GPT or something like that, and I have an error and I'm showing it, and it's giving me like how I might be able to debug it, or it giving me a different code snippet, because I'm experienced, I'm able to detect like, I know that's not the most efficient way to do it, and I can further query it to, come up with a better thing by pointing that out. So, I mean, it is helpful in some regards if you have the experience, which is why I plan to keep, beating the drum that people should definitely learn the foundations. And I think, some of this stuff that we're thinking of as negative might not necessarily be so. It's just a change. People are going to do things differently, right? We all came up probably writing code that we submitted on floppy disks to people, right? Or writing code on a piece of paper for a test. Those days are over. And so, we have new tools, we have new technology, and things have evolved. And so I think it'll be the same way where, we're kind of like the old grandpas, like, oh, why are y'all doing it that way, when they might find, some efficiencies in doing so.
I once walked out of a job interview at the BBC at 8:00 at night where they asked me to write XSLT on a blackboard. And I'm like, okay, this is not my life. I'm not going to do that. This is a very strange thing. Ken just wrote in the chat that to explain the why is his whole job. And I think I would even go further. Would you say that's the job of every lead engineer or every senior engineer in companies, Ken? Haha, got you.
There we go. I hit a shortcut that didn't work. I think that yes is the short answer. Everybody is going to kind of take that role responsibility differently, but I do think that is an important part that comes with being a senior engineer, especially at a company where you've got juniors that you're working with, is that you are sharing your experience and knowledge. And I don't think that actually has changed all that much. It has always been that way. And I do I think that I have a lot more positive view of the future with AI. I do think that there are certainly dangers, and a good example of insecure code being thrown into your code, or a problem with that is that we no longer have the comments in Stack Overflow that say, "Hey, don't use this. This is insecure." Right? So but I do think that AI is going to get better, and there are probably already AIs that are trained on identifying insecure code and could be integrated into the editor eventually as well to say, hey, like can proactively tell us that things are no good. And actually, to Angie's point, I just launched the Epic programming principles that are the principles upon which I make all my decisions. And one of them is to adapt to and adopt productive tools. It's very easy for us to kind of pick the way that we do things and then just stick with that. I can think of a lot of examples of things that I do in the terminal for which there are much better and faster tools developed now that I just don't want to take the old dog, new tricks sort of thing. And I think that AI is definitely one of those things that I see senior engineers cautiously. Well, I'm more cautiously optimistic, more on the optimistic side, but I see quite a few engineers who are very pessimistic about the whole thing, and I think they're missing something important here because I do think that AI has a lot to offer. And so this is actually why when people go through my course material, I recommend that they leave the AI assistant on, even though they're in a learning environment, because part of the learning experience is, how do I deal with this AI assistant that's in my editor? Like, what do I do when it generates this code? How do I review that? You need to practice that. And so this is also why my material you actually run locally on your machine rather than some in-browser editor, because I want you to use the tools that you're going to use for the job. And one of those tools, increasingly for more developers, is an AI assistant. And so learning how to prompt the AI properly and review the code that the AI is generating, I think, is a really important skill for the modern developer.
There's a big thing like, what do we do about the feedback loop? I've seen like which of my GitHub repos were indexed to go into the codex model, and they were all like joke things that I wrote drunk at 3 a.m. And like I wish they weren't indexed, but they were. But a lot of people start actually now blocking AI bots from their blogs, like old school bloggers, old school developers, because they don't want to be part of this world. So the paranoia that you're talking about here, or the fear that you're talking about here, is real. And take it from somebody that is a veteran of like 2 browser wars. There's always cool new things that will replace the standards that we're working with. There's always going to be a Flash. There's always going to be a Silverlight. There's always going to be something. Java applets was the first one to replace me. So, and we have to deal with them. We have to explain to people how to use them in a sensible fashion. And it's great that you say that we do it that way. Angie, you said you have something positive as well before we're getting too much into the grumpy mode here.
Yeah, I feel like Kent personally attacked me with that. Don't turn the AI off. You got to practice, because he gets on my nerves sometimes, and I'm cooking, I'm like, shut up, I got this. But anyway, yeah. So one way we used AI in like a DevRel context was to put like a widget, an AI widget on our docs site. So we trained this AI with like all of the good stuff that we have written. And so it had become essentially an expert on our product. And so when developers had questions, instead of like going in Discord and then having to wait for one of us to reply, they could simply type it in like they would with ChatGPT, but it had like all of the context of our stuff. And so it was able to help them, even with the examples that were not necessarily explicitly in the docs, and it was able to help them build whatever they were going to build. And what I do love about these chatbots is most of the times they do supply a why with whatever answer they're giving you. And so it could be a great learning tool as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, context is an important thing. So, I mean, Liran, you've been doing some working with models and these kind of things. I find it really hard to cut down on context. Like, most of the code assistants will basically give you random answers from the internet rather than just from the workspace that you're in right now. Is there a simple way to avoid that kind of stuff? To say like, hey, we got lots of code. As Angie said, I got this. Like, this is the format that we have our code in. Can you please only give me suggestions that would fit in with the rest of it? Or is this something we still have to thrive towards?
I mean, you could utilize like RAG and those kind of like different pipelines and methodologies to like try and get it to specifically, confirm the specific context. Another interesting approach is like Lakera has built this gamified kind of a security bot where they call it Gandalf. So there's like a character, they have the password, and you have to go to like 8 levels of trying to get the password out. And if you kind of think of like how they implemented it, right? Like the first level is easy. You kind of tell it, okay, give me the password, dude. I gotta go through the levels, and they would. But like the next level isn't that easy, and you have to like figure out like different ways of how to approach this. So I think one of them is like maybe you use an LLM, like an agent of sorts, to generate the context, but then that goes to another agent that has a different policy that maybe you, with your user input, you can't really influence. So potentially you could like sort of like fine tune the context or figure out how to block the context into a specific framing, so you don't get sucked into like those kind of like, security, ethical pitfalls, those kind of like aspect to it. So there's like some interesting, I think, implementations to that. But at the end of the day, the context aspect is important. And that's something that even with static analysis, like if I take the security angle here, like static application security testing, what's called SAST, and developers know it as, ESLint, context is important, right? Like if you run ESLint and, for example, you don't want to run like, system processes, like, child processes, you may have like an ESLint rule that looks for all the required child process stuff, but maybe you're actually using it in a very secure way. So that ESLint rule is actually very rigid, and it's kind of like a false positive at this point, and it's just noise. So having the exact context, like running through like the applications of how it works, how it handles input, parsing the AST tree with that context is like super important. So that is where I think things get interesting. And I think in the future, if we use LLMs more to generate code, that is like the opportunity we have to also get it to generate secure code.
Excellent. Well, we're out of time, and the good news is that we're all going to be on stage at the Congress and to get a 2-hour challenge, because that's going to. We got so much to talk about. This really worked. I'm really excited because I didn't know it would work in that format. So to finish off, you all got to drop off. What is the one thing that makes you excited about AI and development? Like, what do you think is the bit that will bring the future for everybody, and how do you think we can be part of it? We go around like Kent, Liran, and then Angie. And then we go from there.
So for me, the thing I'm most excited about is AI helping people accomplish more than they could before. A lot of people are worried that AI is taking our jobs. And just like in the last talk was mentioned, I think we're going to build more things. When the backhoe was invented, we didn't dig fewer holes because the shovels, shovel workers are all gone. We actually dug more holes. And I think that we're going to be building more things, even one-off things that I think are really powerful. So yeah, I'm excited to build more.
Cool. The shovel was the first groundbreaking invention. Liran?
Yeah, for me, I think I'm intrigued by agents, and I think that might be the future. So I would say, like we used to say, there's an app for that. I think we're going to say in 5 years from now, there's an agent for that. And I think, I suck at all the front-end CSS stuff. I suck at it. And I'm going to want to have like an agent that, gets this thing right for mobile and things like that. So I think that would be the future. We would be developers operating agents.
We can always hire people like Kent or me. So that's
100%. Yeah. I might go to Kent's lessons.
Yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle. Very excited about like the open source nature of AI as well as open standards. I hope you all have seen MCP, which is the Model Context Protocol that Anthropic just put out. So this open standard, I think, is going to be key to making sure like these different AI agents and these systems are interoperable, and this will really enable AI to take it a step further from the responses they're giving us and actually work autonomously to complete actions for us. So I really think we'll start seeing like the IoT stuff that we've been dreaming about come to pass with this.
Excellent. Well, we're out of time, but this is paining me, but Kent has to drop off, Angie has to drop off, and Liran, we're going to stay in touch anyways for once a month. So thank you very much. This was great, and hopefully people learned a lot about it as well. There was some chat in there, and yeah, the recording of this one will be out. And yeah, soon to be on stage for a longer time. Thanks so much.
Thank you all.
All right.
for having us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.